The sky above the frontier colony burned bright red as the alarms screamed across the settlement. People ran through the streets, grabbing whatever they could carry, trying to understand what was happening. Nobody expected a war, and nobody expected it to start like this, sudden, brutal, and without warning. The human outpost had existed on this quiet planet for years, and nothing dangerous had ever come from the deep forests surrounding it. But today, everything changed. Commander Rylan Hale stood on the ridge just outside the base, his eyes fixed on the rising smoke. He had fought battles before, but something about this attack felt wrong. He could feel it in his bones. It was silent at first, then a sharp burst of explosions shook the entire valley. Rylan grabbed his communicator and called for backup, but the signals were distorted. Something or someone was blocking communications. As he moved toward the forest edge, he noticed movement in the shadows. His instincts sharpened. He raised his rifle slowly, expecting an enemy soldier or alien creature. Instead, a small but fierce-looking honey badger came crawling out from behind a fallen tree. But it wasn't a normal honey badger. Its fur had strange patterns, almost like glowing marks under the sunlight. Its eyes had a sharp, intelligent shine as if it understood exactly what was happening. The creature stared at Rylan without fear. Rylan lowered his weapon slightly. Something about this creature felt different, almost familiar, like it had seen battles before. The honey badger growled not at him but at the forest behind them. When Rylan followed its gaze, he saw shapes moving through the trees, dark silhouettes, armed and fast. Rylan realized the honey badger was warning him. He quickly backed away and motioned for the creature to follow. To his surprise, it did. They moved together toward the command outpost where soldiers were already preparing defenses. Before Rylan could speak, the sky erupted again. A massive explosion hit the defense wall, sending debris flying into the air. The shockwave forced Rylan to the ground, and the honey badger rolled beside him, getting back up with surprising strength. "What are you?" Rylan muttered under his breath, but there was no time for questions. Unknown attackers pushed into the settlement from all sides. They were tall, armored, and clearly not from this planet. Rylan had never seen aliens like them before. Their weapons fired blue energy bolts that melted metal on impact. The human soldiers were outnumbered and forced back building by building. Rylan grabbed the honey badger and moved behind a destroyed vehicle. He aimed carefully and fired at the closest alien. The shot hit, but the alien barely stumbled. Rylan fired again, and the creature finally collapsed. The honey badger dashed forward, biting into another alien's arm. The alien shrieked and swung its weapon, but the honey badger dodged with incredible speed. For a moment, Rylan almost smiled. The tiny creature fought with the courage of a soldier, but the situation was impossible. The colony was falling. Buildings burned, comm systems were dead, and enemy ships circled the sky. Rylan knew they had only minutes before everything was lost. He grabbed the honey badger and sprinted toward the emergency launch pads. Escape ships were already launching with civilians on board. Rylan needed to reach his own small scout ship before it was too late. As they ran, the honey badger suddenly stopped. It turned and stared back at the burning settlement. Rylan could see fear and sadness in its eyes. This was its home too. "You come with me," Rylan said softly. "We survive together." The honey badger blinked once, then followed him again. When they reached the launch field, enemy fire rained down from above. Several ships exploded on the pads. Rylan's scout ship was smoking from earlier damage, but still functional. He ran inside and activated the engines while the honey badger climbed onto the co-pilot seat, gripping it with small claws. The ship lifted off just as the last defensive tower collapsed. Rylan tried again to send a distress call, but only static responded. The enemy ships noticed his escape and turned to chase him. Rylan pushed the ship harder, but it was slow and already damaged. Warning lights flashed across the cockpit. The honey badger made a low sound, almost like it sensed danger. "I know," Rylan whispered. "We're not out of this yet." The enemy ships fired at them, shaking the hull. Rylan swerved into the planet's upper atmosphere, but the ship couldn't take the pressure. A loud bang echoed through the cabin as a stabilizer broke loose. Rylan lost control. The scout ship spiraled downward, flames streaking across the windows as the planet's thick jungle canopy rushed up toward them. The honey badger dug its claws into the seat. Rylan fought the controls with all his strength, trying to soften the impact. "Hold on," he shouted. The ship crashed through trees and slammed into the ground with a violent crunch. Darkness covered everything for a moment. When Rylan opened his eyes, sparks were falling from the ceiling. Smoke filled the cabin. His head throbbed with pain. The honey badger was lying beside him, breathing heavily but alive. Outside, the jungle was quiet, too quiet. Rylan pushed open the broken hatch and stepped into the alien forest. The air smelled of damp earth and unknown plants. Strange creature calls echoed in the distance. He checked his scanner. No humans nearby, no friendly signals, and the enemy ships had disappeared. They were alone, stranded. The honey badger slowly walked beside him, its body low to the ground, sniffing the strange air. Rylan looked around the endless jungle and felt a heavy weight in his chest. Survival here would not be easy. But then the honey badger stood next to him, staring straight ahead as if ready to face whatever came next. Rylan felt something shift inside him, an understanding, a silent promise. Whatever this place was, they would face it together. And somewhere far away, the same unknown enemy that destroyed their colony was still searching. Rylan didn't know why, he didn't know what they wanted, but he knew one thing clearly. This was only the beginning. Rylan woke up at dawn, though he wasn't sure how long he had slept. The jungle around the crash site glowed faintly with strange blue lights drifting from the leaves. The air was humid and thick with the smell of wet soil. For a moment he forgot where he was. Then he heard a soft growl near his foot. The honey badger sat next to him, watching the forest with alert eyes. Its fur was covered in dust and broken leaves, but it looked ready for anything. Rylan pushed himself up and took a slow breath. Pain shot down his left arm, but at least it wasn't broken. The crashed scout ship lay behind them, half buried under vines and branches. Smoke no longer rose from it, which meant the fire had died out. Inside, most of the systems were fried. There was no way to call for help. Rylan knew they needed water, food, and shelter before the day turned too hot. The planet's sun was bright and harsh. He also needed answers. Why were those alien attackers so aggressive? What did they want from the human colony? And most important, were they searching for survivors? His stomach tightened at that last thought. He looked at the honey badger. "You ready?" he asked. The creature made a short chirping sound and walked ahead confidently. Rylan followed with his rifle raised. The forest floor was uneven, full of massive roots twisting like snakes under their feet. Strange flowers with glowing petals opened slowly as sunlight touched them, releasing a soft mist into the air. It felt peaceful, but Rylan knew better. Beautiful places often held the most danger. The honey badger sniffed the ground, suddenly stopping. It growled softly. Rylan crouched beside it and saw tracks in the dirt, large, clawed footprints, too big for any normal animal. Something heavy had passed by recently. Rylan stood still and listened. In the distance, he heard a deep, throaty roar, followed by trees cracking as something huge moved. It wasn't an alien soldier. This was a creature from the planet's wilds, he whispered. "We avoid that." The honey badger agreed. They moved quietly through the thick jungle, stepping over fallen logs and pushing through tall ferns. Every sound made Rylan tense. Birds with metallic feathers flew overhead, making strange, clicking noises. Insects glowed beneath the leaves. The planet was alive, but in an unpredictable way. After an hour of walking, they reached a small clearing with a shallow pool of clear water. Rylan knelt beside it and dipped his hand in. The water was cool and tasted clean. He filled his portable canister while the honey badger drank eagerly. For a moment, they both relaxed. Then something changed in the air, a shift so small that only the honey badger sensed it. Its ears perked up, its body stiffened. It growled in a low warning tone. Rylan froze. "What is it?" The honey badger didn't answer, but it stared at a thick wall of vines ahead. Rylan raised his rifle and aimed at the spot, listening carefully. The forest went silent, too silent. Then the vines parted. A creature stepped out, massive, with a muscular body and rough gray skin marked with glowing blue veins. Its eyes were yellow and hungry. It wasn't an alien soldier. It was a predator, one built for killing. Its jaw opened wide, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Rylan slowly backed away. "Don't move fast," he whispered to the honey badger. "We don't want to trigger it." But the creature already smelled them. It roared, shaking the ground. The honey badger bared its teeth and stepped forward. "No," Rylan hissed. "We can't fight that." The creature lunged. Rylan rolled aside as the massive beast crashed into the ground where he stood. The honey badger darted beneath it, scratching its legs to distract it. The creature howled, turning its attention to the quick-moving animal. Rylan fired his rifle. The shot hit the creature's shoulder, but the beast barely reacted. It charged again. Rylan ran behind a fallen log as the predator smashed into it, breaking the wood like it was nothing. The honey badger launched itself at the creature's face, clawing desperately. The predator shook violently, trying to throw it off. Rylan fired again, aiming for the glowing veins on its chest. This time the beast stumbled, roaring in pain. "Come on," Rylan shouted. The honey badger leaped away just as the creature swung its massive head. Rylan took a deep breath, aimed at the brightest glowing vein, and fired one more shot. The creature collapsed with a heavy thud, shaking the ground. Its glowing veins slowly dimmed until they disappeared. Rylan stood breathing hard, sweat dripping down his face. The honey badger walked to his side, panting but unharmed. Rylan knelt and touched its head gently. "You saved me," he said. The honey badger made a soft growl that almost sounded proud. Rylan looked down at the dead beast. "If the wildlife is like this," he murmured, "surviving here will be harder than I thought." They moved on quickly. Predators were usually followed by scavengers, and Rylan didn't want to meet any more creatures today. As they walked deeper into the jungle, the trees grew taller and older. Strange ruins appeared, broken stones with unknown carvings, half swallowed by moss and vines. Rylan brushed dirt from one of the carvings. It showed tall humanoid shapes standing beside smaller animals. Some symbols glowed faintly. It looked like an ancient culture once lived here. He wondered if the honey badger species had been important in the past. The creature watched him closely, as if it wanted him to understand something. But Rylan had no way of knowing what these carvings meant. They continued walking until they reached a large rocky formation shaped like a broken tower. A small cave opened at the base. Rylan scanned the inside. It was empty, dry, and out of sight from the sky. It was perfect for temporary shelter. They entered the cave. Rylan set down his backpack and checked his remaining supplies. His food packs would last only a couple of days if he rationed them. He needed to hunt or find edible plants soon. The honey badger curled up near the entrance, staying alert. Rylan sat beside a rock and leaned against it, feeling exhaustion finally catch up to him. As night settled, the jungle grew loud again. Strange calls echoed between the trees. Shadows moved just outside the cave. Rylan couldn't see them, but he could feel them watching. He didn't sleep much. He kept his rifle ready, and the honey badger stayed awake beside him like a silent guardian. Deep in the darkness, he wondered if the alien attackers were somewhere on this planet too, searching for survivors, maybe searching for him. The thought chilled him more than the night air. Somewhere far beyond the jungle, something stirred. Something connected to the ruins, something connected to the honey badger. And without knowing it, Rylan had just stepped into a much older story, one that was waiting for him. Morning came slowly, with soft orange light touching the cave walls. Rylan sat upright, his eyes heavy from not sleeping well. All night he heard strange footsteps moving around the cave, but nothing attacked. The honey badger stayed awake the entire time, watching the entrance like a loyal guard. Rylan felt a strange comfort knowing the creature stayed with him even through the long, tense night. He stretched his sore muscles, picked up his gear, and moved toward the cave mouth. The air outside was cool and filled with morning mist. The honey badger stepped beside him, looking ready for another long day. "We need to explore further," Rylan said quietly. "If we want to survive more than a few days, we need food, water, and maybe answers." The honey badger made a soft clicking noise and began walking ahead. Rylan followed. The forest looked different in the morning. Sunbeams slid through tall trees, making the mist glow. The ground sparkled with dew like tiny crystals. But even in this beauty, Rylan stayed alert. Every rustle could be danger. They walked for some time until the trees thinned out and opened into another clearing. In the center lay an old stone platform, cracked and covered with moss. Strange stones stood around it in a circle, each carved with glowing runes. These ruins were older than the colony's history records, maybe older than any human had ever studied. Rylan slowly approached the platform. The honey badger stopped near one of the glowing stones and sniffed it, almost like it recognized something from long ago. "You've seen this before?" Rylan asked softly. The creature didn't answer but placed its paw on the stone. To Rylan's shock, the rune under the paw lit up brighter. Rylan stepped back. What are you?" The honey badger turned and looked at him with calm eyes, as if telling him the truth wasn't for today. Before he could think more, a soft hum filled the air. Rylan stiffened and raised his rifle. The honey badger crouched low. The sound grew louder, almost like distant machinery. Then Rylan saw them, drones, 3 of them floating just above the treetops. They weren't human-made. Their design was sleek, dark, and carried the same blue glow as the alien soldiers that attacked the colony. Ryland's heartbeat quickened. If drones were here, the enemy wasn't far. The drones scanned the area with blue lights. Ryland and the honey badger hid behind a fallen tree, barely breathing. One drone hovered dangerously close, its scanning beam passing inches from Ryland's face. He stayed frozen, hoping the creature beside him wouldn't make a sound, but the honey badger understood the danger. It stayed perfectly silent. After a long moment, the drones moved deeper into the jungle. Ryland exhaled slowly. "They are searching for survivors. They're searching for me." The honey badger looked up at him, sensing the fear growing inside him. "We need to move," Ryland whispered, "before they call the soldiers." They left the ruined circle and pushed deeper into the forest. But with each step, the jungle grew darker and thicker. Vines hung low like traps. Shadows moved between the trees. The air smelled different here, old and heavy. Ryland felt like someone was watching them. Suddenly, the honey badger stopped again. Its ears twitched. Its eyes narrowed. It growled low. Ryland raised his weapon, scanning the thick undergrowth. Then something stepped out. It was tall, almost twice Ryland's height. Its body was humanoid but slim, covered in dark armor that seemed grown rather than built. Its face had no mouth, only a single glowing eye in the center. The creature moved with silent grace as if it floated. Ryland's breath caught in his throat. He had never seen a being like this, not even in military reports. The creature tilted its head slightly, studying them. It didn't raise a weapon. It didn't attack. Instead, it pointed at the honey badger. The honey badger raised its head and made a short, challenging sound. The creature responded with a hum almost peaceful. Ryland whispered, "Do you know each other?" The tall being took one step forward. Ryland aimed his rifle, but the creature did not react. It simply pointed again at the honey badger, then at the glowing stones in the distance, then at the sky. It was trying to communicate. Ryland lowered his weapon slightly. "What do you want?" The creature slowly reached into a small case attached to its armor and pulled out a round device. It floated the device toward Ryland. The human hesitated but took it cautiously. The creature spoke, but the voice was distant and echoing, like it came from inside the earth itself. Ryland couldn't understand the words, but the device in his hand lit up. A hologram flickered, showing the planet from above, with glowing lines spreading across it like ancient paths. Ryland stepped closer. "Is this a map?" The honey badger stared at the hologram with deep focus, as if the paths meant something to its kind. Before Ryland could study it more, the creature suddenly turned its head toward the trees. The jungle trembled. Heavy footsteps approached, multiple, fast, organized. The alien soldiers. The creature looked at Ryland one last time. Then it placed its hand gently on the honey badger's head, as if giving a blessing or a warning. It stepped back into the shadows and vanished as if melting into the forest. Ryland didn't have time to process any of it. The soldiers were getting closer. "Run!" he shouted. The honey badger sprinted, Ryland right behind it. Blue energy bolts shot through the trees, exploding leaves and bark. Ryland ducked, rolled, and fired back once, but his shot barely slowed the soldiers. The honey badger darted through roots and branches with shocking speed, guiding Ryland through hidden paths. They broke through a wall of bushes and reached a steep cliff overlooking a deep river. Ryland looked behind them. Enemy soldiers were almost through the trees. He looked at the water below, fast, dangerous, but maybe survivable. The honey badger gave a sharp bark, as if telling him there was no choice. Ryland nodded, together. He grabbed the creature and jumped. Cold water swallowed them whole, pulling them into the violent current. Ryland held the honey badger close as the river dragged them downstream, away from the soldiers, deeper into the unknown jungle. He only hoped the map in his pocket would help them survive whatever came next. The river dragged Ryland and the honey badger through roaring waves, spinning them again and again. Water slammed into Ryland's face, making it hard to breathe. He held the honey badger tightly with one arm while using the other to push upward, fighting to stay above the surface. The current was strong and wild, pulling them deeper into the unknown parts of the jungle. After what felt like minutes of chaos, the river widened and slowed. Ryland gasped for air, coughing hard. He kicked his legs and guided the honey badger toward the shore. When they reached land, he collapsed on the muddy bank, breathing heavily. The honey badger shook off the water and paced beside him, checking the surroundings with sharp eyes. Ryland pushed himself up slowly. His entire body ached and his uniform was torn in several places, but he was alive. The honey badger nudged his leg softly, making sure he was conscious. "I'm okay," Rylan whispered. "Just tired." He looked around. This part of the jungle looked different, denser, darker, and filled with huge trees that blocked most of the sunlight. Strange, glowing insects drifted through the air like tiny lanterns. The river they escaped from curled far behind them, disappearing into thick fog. Rylan sat up straighter. "We can't stay here. Soldiers might track us." He checked his pockets and felt the round device the tall alien had given him. Relief washed through him. The map was still safe. He activated it carefully. The hologram appeared again, showing the planet with glowing lines marking ancient paths. One of the lines shined brighter than the rest, leading toward the mountains far to the west. The honey badger watched the hologram with deep focus. It stepped closer and touched the glowing line with its paw. The map reacted, new symbols appeared. Rylan stared, confused. "This path means something to you, doesn't it? Or your species?" The honey badger looked up at him, its eyes full of meaning he could not yet understand. Before he could say more, a loud sound echoed from the forest, a deep rumbling growl followed by heavy footsteps. The honey badger crouched low again, fur bristling. Rylan grabbed his rifle and scanned the trees. Branches shook violently as something large moved toward them. A huge creature emerged, even bigger than the predator they fought earlier. Its skin was dark green with thick plates like natural armor. Its head had horns curling backward and its eyes glowed a fiery orange. It stepped forward, sniffing the air. It was hunting. Rylan whispered, "Not again." The creature lowered its head, ready to charge. But before it could attack, something unexpected happened. The honey badger walked forward, not attacking, not hiding, but standing tall. It made a strange sound, not a growl but a pattern of sharp chirps, almost like a call or command. The giant creature paused. Rylan blinked in shock. The beast tilted its head and made a softer sound, almost respectful. Then it slowly turned away and walked back into the forest, disappearing among the shadows. Rylan exhaled. "You can control them." The honey badger didn't answer. It simply walked back and nudged Rylan toward the direction of the glowing path on the map. Rylan followed, his mind racing. This creature wasn't just a companion. It was part of something ancient, maybe something powerful. The ruins, the alien, the map, everything seemed connected through the honey badger. They traveled for hours through the thick forest until they reached a valley with tall rock walls on both sides. Strange plants grew along the cliffs, glowing faintly. The honey badger sniffed the air and moved forward with confidence, as if it knew this place well. Rylan felt uneasy. "Are we close to something important?" The honey badger made a soft sound and kept walking. They followed a narrow path between the cliffs until the air suddenly grew colder. The jungle noises faded. Rylan stepped more carefully. Then he noticed something ahead, large stone pillars rising from the ground, each decorated with symbols similar to the ruins from earlier. They had found another ancient site. In the center stood a massive stone door, taller than any human building on the colony. The surface was smooth and covered with glowing markings. The honey badger approached it and placed its paw on a central symbol. The door responded instantly. The runes lit up one by one, forming a circular pattern. A deep rumbling shook the valley. Dust fell from the stone as the door slowly slid open, revealing a dark interior with soft blue light coming from within. Rylan stepped closer, amazed. This is a temple, a vault. He felt a strange chill. Whatever was inside had been untouched for centuries. The honey badger entered the opening without hesitation. Rylan followed, gripping his rifle tightly. The inside of the structure was huge. The floor was polished stone, the walls covered with ancient carvings showing being similar to the tall alien they met earlier, tall figures with single glowing eyes, guiding smaller creatures like the honey badger. Rylan studied the carvings. "This civilization, it looks like they protected your species." He walked deeper until he reached a large chamber filled with floating blue crystals. In the center stood a pedestal with a strange metal device resting on it, shaped like a crown with glowing lines. The honey badger approached it slowly and stopped. The white light faded slowly, like a thick fog lifting from Rylan's eyes. When his vision returned, he found himself lying on the cold temple floor, breathing hard. His ears rang, and for a moment he couldn't tell where he was. The air smelled electric, like lightning had struck inside the chamber. He pushed himself up and blinked, trying to understand what had happened. The pedestal was glowing faintly, and the device on it was no longer shining. But the honey badger was no longer standing beside it. Instead, it lay on the floor a few steps away, unconscious. Rylan rushed to it. Hey, wake up." He gently lifted the creature in his arms. Its fur looked different. Patterns that once glowed softly were now brighter, clearer, almost like they had awakened. Rylan touched its side and felt a faint pulse. "You're alive," he whispered with relief. "But what did that machine do to you?" Before he could examine it more, he heard movement outside. Voices echoed down the temple halls. The alien soldiers had entered. Their footsteps were heavy, organized, and getting closer. Rylan looked around desperately. There was no other exit, no back doorway, no hidden passage. Only the main entrance where the soldiers were coming from. He lifted the honey badger and backed into the shadows behind a large stone pillar. He held his breath as the soldiers entered the chamber. They were 6, wearing the same sharp armor with glowing blue lines. Their helmets scanned the chamber with bright lights. One of them spoke in a deep mechanical language that Rylan didn't understand, but the tone was clear. They were searching for him. The leader pointed toward the pedestal. The soldiers moved in formation, inspecting the device. Their lights flickered across the carvings on the walls, activating symbols Rylan had never noticed before. The leader checked a scanner on his arm. The device beeped rapidly, pointing toward Rylan's hiding spot. Rylan gripped his rifle with tense fingers. He didn't want to fight, not with the honey badger unconscious in his arms, but he had no choice. He aimed at the closest soldier and took a silent breath. Before he could fire, a soft hum filled the room again. The carvings on the walls began to glow, brighter than before, as if reacting to the presence of the soldiers. The alien soldiers stepped back, surprised. Then the floor shook violently. Rylan stumbled and fell to one knee. The honey badger twitched in his arms, still unconscious. Cracks ran through the stone floor. Dust fell from the ceiling. The entire temple vibrated like a giant engine waking up. The soldiers panicked, shouting in their strange language. One of them fired at the pedestal, but the energy bolt bounced off an invisible shield. A deep sound echoed through the temple, slow, powerful, ancient. Rylan recognized it. Not exactly a voice, but the same echoing tone he heard from the tall alien before. It was like something that had been sleeping for centuries had finally awakened. Suddenly, the ground split open beneath the soldiers. The stone cracked apart, forming a wide, glowing symbol. The soldiers scrambled to escape, but a burst of blue light erupted upward, throwing them across the chamber like rag dolls. Rylan shielded the honey badger with his body. The blast shook his bones. When the light dimmed, the soldiers lay scattered across the floor, their armor smoking. Some tried to get up but collapsed again. The temple grew quiet. Rylan looked down at the honey badger, still asleep but glowing faintly. Whatever happened, the creature seemed to be at the center of it. He stood slowly, knowing the temple wouldn't remain safe for long. The soldiers were down, but more would come. The enemy wanted the ancient technology, and they wanted the honey badger even more now. He carried the creature in his arms and moved toward the exit. Outside, the valley was covered in dust and broken rock from the temple's energy blast. The air was thick, and the sun had already begun to set behind the mountains. Rylan scanned the area for threats, but the soldiers who were guarding the valley had vanished, either escaping or caught in the blast. He took a deep breath. "We need to move before they regroup." He walked down the valley path, careful with each step. The honey badger made a soft sound, still unconscious but alive. Several minutes passed before Rylan finally reached the riverbank again. He sat on a fallen log and placed the honey badger beside him. The fading sunlight made the glowing patterns on its fur shimmer gently. He brushed a hand over its head. "What are you becoming?" The creature's eyes fluttered, then slowly opened. Rylan leaned closer. "Hey, you awake?" The honey badger looked at him, but something in its eyes had changed. They seemed deeper, brighter, filled with understanding. Rylan felt a chill. "You understand me better now, don't you?" The creature made a slow nod. Not a natural animal movement. This was deliberate, intelligent. Rylan was speechless for a moment. "Did that machine unlock something in you? Some kind of ancient ability?" The honey badger looked at the glowing device in Rylan's pocket and tapped it gently with its paw. The message was clear. It wanted him to use it. Rylan activated the hologram again. This time the glowing map responded to the honey badger's presence. The lines shifted, revealing a new symbol deep in the mountains, a place marked with intense brightness. "That's where we go next," Rylan said softly. "And I think that's where your truth is." Before they could move, a distant roar echoed through the jungle. Not a beast, not natural. It was the sound of dropships. Rylan's eyes widened. The honey badger stood and growled softly. Enemy reinforcements were coming. Rylan grabbed his gear and lifted the honey badger onto his shoulder. "We'll make it. We'll reach that place before they find us." The honey badger chirped sharply, determined. Together, they ran into the darkening jungle, following the glowing path on the map as the sky filled with enemy ships searching for them. The final truth waited in the mountains, and so did the final battle. The mountains grew larger with every step Rylan took. The air turned thinner, colder, and the wind carried a strange, humming sound that felt almost alive. The honey badger walked beside him now with steady steps. Its fur glowed softly, lighting their path in the early dawn. Rylan glanced at it often, amazed at how much it had changed. The creature looked stronger, more aware, almost as if it carried ancient memories inside. They had been climbing for hours. Enemy dropships roared behind them at times, searching the jungle from above. Rylan knew it was only a matter of time before the soldiers traced their trail. They were hunting for the honey badger and the ancient secrets it held. He tightened his grip on his rifle. "We're close," he said softly, looking at the glowing map. "Whatever waits up there, it's important." The honey badger chirped quietly and walked forward with confidence. They turned a corner around a rocky cliff and stopped. A huge stone gate was built into the mountain wall. Runes covered it, glowing bright blue like veins under skin. The gate was open slightly, as if waiting for them. Rylan took a deep breath and stepped inside. The chamber beyond was massive, almost like a world carved inside the mountain. Blue light shimmered from floating crystals hanging in the air. Walls were covered with carvings showing tall ancient beings guiding small animal-like creatures. Their glowing single eyes matched the alien they had met earlier. The honey badger walked slow, as if remembering something long forgotten. Rylan followed, trying to understand the carvings. He finally spoke. "This place is your species' home, isn't it? This is where you came from." The honey badger turned and looked directly into his eyes. There was no doubt. This was truth. Rylan was about to say more when a loud noise echoed behind them. The mountain shook slightly. The honey badger growled. Rylan spun around, raising his rifle. Alien soldiers poured into the chamber, dozens of them with heavy armor and upgraded weapons. At the front walked a tall commander with glowing blue eyes and sharper armor than the others. He looked furious, focused, and certain of victory. Rylan pulled the honey badger behind him and stepped forward, trying to hide the fear inside him. "You want us?" Rylan said, his voice echoing in the chamber. "Then come and take us." The commander raised his hand. Soldiers aimed their weapons. The honey badger stepped forward instead of back. Its fur glowed brighter. The ancient crystals above began to hum, reacting to the creature's presence. The carvings on the walls lit up with gentle blue light. The commander shouted an order. Energy beams fired toward them. The honey badger leaped in front of Rylan. A pulse of ancient power exploded outward. The beams hit an invisible shield and bent away, striking the walls instead. Rylan stared in shock. The honey badger had awakened something powerful. The soldiers regrouped and fired again. But the honey badger didn't stop. It growled loudly and the entire chamber trembled. The floating crystals rotated faster. Blue energy spiraled into the creature, surrounding it with swirling light. Rylan watched with wide eyes. The honey badger was no longer just an animal. It was becoming something far greater, something its ancestors once were. The ancient energy exploded outward again. The wave hit the soldiers like a storm, armor cracked, weapons shattered. Some aliens fell to their knees. Others stumbled backward, terrified, but the commander stood firm. He stepped forward through the energy and raised a massive glowing weapon. The honey badger's shield flickered. The commander fired a high-energy bolt. This one cut through the air like a blade. Rylan didn't think. He jumped in front of the honey badger. The bolt struck him in the shoulder and threw him to the ground. Pain shot through him like fire. He gasped for breath. The honey badger made a sound Rylan had never heard, pure pain and fear. It ran to him and nudged his face, gently whimpering. Rylan forced a smile. "I'm okay," he whispered, even though he was. "Don't stop. You're the only one who can end this." The commander aimed again. The honey badger turned toward him, glowing brighter, almost blinding. The chamber shook violently. Crystals burst with light. The carvings glowed like stars. The ancient energy rose in a huge wave, gathering behind the creature. Rylan could feel it, not just power, but a memory, a legacy. The honey badger was part of an ancient guardian species. They once protected this planet against invaders. That power had been sleeping for centuries, waiting for someone brave enough to awaken it. And now it was awake. The honey badger growled with deep, thunderous force. The energy blast erupted, stronger than anything before. It hit the commander and lifted him into the air. His armor cracked, shattered, and he flew backward across the chamber, crashing into the stone wall. The remaining soldiers ran in panic. Some dropped their weapons, others stumbled in fear. The honey badger stared at them, and the energy pulse expanded again, pushing every enemy out of the chamber and sealing the stone gate behind them with glowing light. Silence returned. Rylan lay weak on the ground, breathing hard. The honey badger rushed to him, nudging his chest, worried. Its fur no longer glowed wildly, now it glowed gently, warmly, like soft fire. Rylan smiled and touched its head. "You saved me again." The creature laid its head on his chest, and Rylan felt a deep bond, stronger than words. They had survived things no one else could. They had fought side by side. They had become more than partners, they had become family. Minutes passed before Rylan found the strength to sit up. The chamber lights dimmed softly, returning to peaceful colors. He looked around. "This place, this power belongs to you," he whispered. "Your species, your history, it's all here." The honey badger looked up at him, then nudged the glowing device in his pocket. When Rylan activated it, the map changed again. A new symbol appeared, one that represented protection, unity, and peace. Rylan understood. "This planet needs a guardian," he said softly, "and you're the last one." The honey badger looked at him with soft eyes, and for the first time, Rylan understood the feeling behind them. The creature wasn't asking him to leave. It wanted him to stay beside it as its partner, as its friend. Rylan